everything's an offense now. Like, you want to be a holy person that goes after Jesus, then go after the resources that Jesus gives you.
Yeah.
You really want to grow?
Everything's
like,
for you.
And I'm talking to young people who want to be serious about Jesus. Like, go ask somebody to mentor you. Like, don't buy that lie. I was going to say bull. I don't know if I can say bull. Can I say bull? I feel like we kind of like low-key have like a special like place in our heart for young adults because that's like so much of our story. But yeah, so we were sitting on the couch the other day and we're sitting here talking about our community, and we were like, our young people have to talk about some of this junk that we worked through.
Yeah, because we had some leaders that were like pretty abrupt. I don't know if abrupt is a word, but like really in our face about certain things. Like I could think of someone like, people might not know him, but Mike DiOrio is one of the people I think of that with the dudes, it was like, there was no sugarcoating. It was like he was going to come to you and just ask you the questions that you maybe are avoiding with your friend group. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden you're like back to the wall. You're like, holy, like I wasn't expecting to be asked this question right now. And it's like, sometimes that's the best way because you have you didn't have time to think of something to say. It was like, oh shoot. Yeah, I did do that. You know what I mean? It's like, so.
We all need like the tough love sometimes.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot. We still have a lot of it. Even as adults, now married with kids, you still need some of that. But all right, so that's kind of what led us here today, was we just wanted to create a space to kind of talk about things that we've wrestled through in our early 20s, and not that we have too much under our belt because we're only in our 30s, but I think we got something. I think we got something to give.
We've figured out some things.
We figured out some things.
Some things easier than others. But
So we'll start with kind of this concept of fake or follower, right? Because I think that a huge one as a young adult is you're just trying to figure out where life's supposed to take you. Like, where does God want me? Where do I belong? What is God currently doing in my life, and what do I make of it? Like, what do I invest into? What do I not invest into so that I can be who God's called me to be? But I know something that we've gone through personally, but we're still seeing, even a decade plus later, is young people wrestling with this idea of Jesus. Like, we know we want Jesus. We know we want to be influenced by Jesus, but I think sometimes we don't fully understand what it means to be led by Jesus, because there's a difference between being influenced by him and actually living for him. Yeah. And we definitely know that firsthand. But like, what would you kind of say about that? Like, how do you distinguish, when you're kind of faking it and going through the motions with Jesus versus like, no, like I really am dying to myself daily as a young person?
Yeah, I feel like being a young adult is like a weird place. It's because in reality, a few years ago, you were in high school and you couldn't even go to the bathroom without someone telling you that you could go to the bathroom. And now you're thrust into like adulthood, but it's like, are you really an adult? You don't really know what you're doing. I could think of us, like, we got married young, and it was like, we didn't know what we were doing with anything.
We still don't know what we're doing.
We're figuring, I know, we're faking it. The kids think we know what we're doing. We have no idea. But anyways, so it is like a weird time in your 20s, and that's fine. That's what it's meant for. Like, you're supposed to figure, like Pastor Mark always says it, you don't really start living until you reach your 30s. And so knowing that, it's like, all right, you got these years where you can kind of figure things out. You have that sort of freedom. Some of us, I mean, if you don't get married young, I could think of a few guys in my crew that are in that age group, and it's like, all right, this is a good time to figure life out, figure out, what you think God's asking you to do with your life, as far as career, ministry, so on and so forth. So I think it's a good time to kind of like really dive into what your purpose is. And that is tricky for some people because it's like, how do I figure that out? And sometimes you don't figure out, like I love what Pastor Marco says, like no one ever told him he was going to be a pastor. He just did what was in front of him. And sometimes that's all it takes. But I think in that age group, sometimes there's a lot of complacency and there's a lot of, oh, like, I have time, or like, just not that urgency to like actually like do the things that are in front of you and do them well. And I think that's one of the things that we learned early on at New Life was that concept of do what's in front of you and do it well. Yeah. Because we jumped in, again, with the young adult ministry, we jumped in, and then Pastor Marco announces that we're going to start the same thing at URI, where I was currently attending. And it wasn't like anyone had to say like, hey, you guys are going to be, you know, heading this thing up, or any. We just were like, yo, we want to help. You know, we see this is in front of us. It makes sense. I'm already at URI. And so we just took that step and began to minister in that way. And as we did that, you know, God continued to like expand, you know, and show us what our purpose, because I think back to that time, like you were really struggling with where you saw yourself, because like I've been on a worship team since I was like 8 or 9. So I remember that was like a struggle for you, because like I knew part of my purpose was to be a worship leader. And so that was easy. Like I just kept pursuing that and feeding into that. And for you, it was like
the polar opposite.
Yeah, it was
I
like
was
a
having like
struggle.
an identity crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was unique because I was 19, 20. All I knew was that I loved Jesus and I wanted to be involved in the church, and I had no idea where to start. And although I felt really blessed that God surrounded me with really strong leaders to kind of help coach me along the way, I struggled a lot with comparison, because the catch-22 with being around confident, strong leaders is they, for the most part, or at least then I perceived that they were really confident in their identity and where God had called them. And I was just like young in my 20s going, I have no idea. Like I can't sing. I don't play the drums. Like even my friend group, it seemed like my friend group at the time, although they were 19, 20, 21 like us, they just seemed a little bit farther along, I guess, in that, you know, like I think of some of our closest friends, you know, one of them knew she was called to lead in worship. You know, the other one was very confident in her like gifting. She's very like hospitable. Like she knew what ministries kind of fit that gifting that she already could identify in herself. And again, all I knew was I just love Jesus. Yeah. And I think we overcomplicate it, you know, and we fall into the trap of comparison, right? Or again, being fake unintentionally because we're trying to play roles or be people that we're not. Even in trying to figure out who we are. And I love what you said. I think it's so simple. Like, if we just do what's in front of us, like, all right, like, someone needs to go pick up that trash at youth night, like, just go pick it up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not even about, like what the title or what that, I don't know, like, that, I think that's such a stressor. Like, what ministry am I called to? Like, just, you're called to the ministry of displaying the gospel of Jesus. Like, your ministry is to just live the gospel. Like that is your ministry. And then God's so faithful to kind of meet you along the way, because even then, like I think I did honestly everything. Like, I don't know, I did cafe. I was thrown into like welcome to, like I legit have probably done every ministry aside from like being an usher or kids at some point over the last
worship.
Yeah, or worship. Yeah, you don't want me doing worship. That wouldn't be good. Over the course of time. But on the flip side, when I look back at my 20s, I can literally identify key lessons that I learned with each exposure that I had. And I think had I tripped myself up on like, oh, so-and-so said this was my specific gift, I would have missed opportunities to really follow Jesus and to find him in every element of even ministry. Yeah.
And even so, like going back to like the main, you know, topic, like, you know, how to be a follower. For me, like when I think about those years, like one of the things that I know, like I struggled through for most of my 20s, and even now, like it's something that still creeps in, is that whole concept of like, am I living a life, like how do I word this? Like, is my life focus, like a main focus is God, or am I trying to do my thing and then add God on like like a sprinkle of salt, like Salt Bay. Remember Salt Bay? You know, like it's like you just sprinkling on God, and hopefully He blesses everything. When in reality, it's like He's the chef, He's the kitchen, He's everything. And so like, I know in my 20s, it's like I'm trying to live my life the way I'm planning to do it. I have these career goals, I have these ministry goals, I have these relational goals, and then, hey God, if you have time, can you bless these things that I'm trying to do? And you see that a lot. You see people trying to like figure, you know, oh, I got this side hustle, I'm doing this. It's like, all right, like how much of that is blessed by God? Like, are you actually living in a way that's surrendering everything to God? Because again, we compartmentalize, right? Like, yeah, I'm in school. Okay, you're in school, like that can be part of God's purpose for you. Like, what's the difference? Like I was at school and I did a terrible job at that, because like my first 2 years I was like doing my own thing over there, and then like I get saved when we got to New Life, and then like we start the ministry there, and then that's when I really saw like, oh, this is all connected. You know, I'm here studying to get a degree, but I'm also here to be the light, to be God's hands and feet. And so once you get a hold of that, then you really become a follower, because, you know, Jesus, when he talked to people about following him, it was never like I think of the guy who was like, can I go home and bury my, whatever it was, my father or something. He's like, the dead bury the dead. I'm like, that's pretty intense. But I think he was just trying to prove a point. Like, if you're going to follow me, like I'm it. Like, you're either all in or you're not. There's no middle ground. And I think too many times, like, we all fall guilty of that. You know, like with practical stuff, like we're buying a dryer, and it's like, I don't remember asking God, like, is this the dryer? You know, like, is this the right one? I don't know. But it's like, again, you can, I don't know. It's just, are we practically following God and allowing him into the decisions that we're making, the people that we're with, the places that we're going, you know, or are we just doing our own thing and then hoping that God comes along? So.
I love that you said that. You talked about, you know, that sometimes, especially as young people, when we're trying to like sort through all of this stuff, this life stuff and adulting, we want God to be kind of like the addition, right? Like the cherry on top, rather than like the full course meal.
Yeah.
And what for you, like when you think of like holiness, like what, for a young person who's saying, I want to live holy, but I don't know where to start, like what would you say would be like kind of like that jump start?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was just having this conversation with someone the other day. It was like, if you're dating someone, and right, this kid was dating someone, started coming to the church, both of them, they got convicted a couple of weeks ago with pastor's message. And I told him, like, all right, that's fine. You know, that's good, right? But now the flip side of that is, are you setting up the healthy boundaries that are going to allow you to live that life that God's calling you to live? Because if you just continue to do the things you were doing before, you're going to continue, like we lived through that, because we got to church together, and it was like we felt that same conviction, like we have to live a different life, and we stumbled through that. You know, we didn't have that leadership to tell us, like, I mean, we didn't listen, that's good, but like the boundary part, it took us a while to get boundaries down right, and it was like, listen, like Pastor always says, like, one thing doesn't lead to another. Like, there's a lot of things that lead to the other. So it's like, if you're hanging out with your girl at her house, in her room, the door shut, like, what else is going to happen? We're human beings. Like, don't be an idiot. Like, you know, just there's boundaries you can set. And even as a single dude, like, there's so many boundaries you can set up. You have to have that self-awareness to ask yourself, all right, the things that I don't want, like Paul says, right, the things I want to do, I don't, and the things I do, I don't. It's like, if I don't want to be like looking at like pornography on my phone, and I find that like when I'm watching TV late at night is when I get tempted, then don't watch TV late at night. Like, it's really not that hard. Like, and I'm speaking from experience, because I was an idiot for a lot of years when it came to that stuff. Like, everything was right in front of me, and I just refused to look at myself hard enough to say, like, these are the things that I need to step away from for some season, you know, like, It may be you have to take social media off. Like if you're texting girls, you shouldn't be like, all right, then block them, whatever. Like do the things to live the life that Jesus is calling you to live, or don't. You know, like it's like Pastor says, like if you want to go that way, go all out.
Yeah.
You know, or if you're gonna go follow Jesus, go all in. Like there's no middle ground. There's no flirting with Jesus. That doesn't work.
Really good.
And so, again, speaking from experience, like when it came to like holiness, like I'm in a different part of my life now when it comes to that, where it's like we just talked about it the other day. I was finding that like I'm listening to too much sports radio, so it's like I had to delete the thing off my phone, so like I wouldn't even be tempted to go to it, because I was finding that was a distraction, like, and it was a way of me not dealing with things. And for me, if I keep doing that, then I'm going to end up doing something else that numbs me, and then something else, and then something else. That's how it happens. It's not, oh my gosh, I ended up hooking up with this girl. I didn't mean to. It's like, no, you took progressive steps towards that for a significant amount of time and didn't let anyone in.
Yeah.
That's the problem. You didn't let anyone in. No one had permission to say, hey, I see you taking some steps in the wrong direction. That's how you live holy. Is no one's perfect. You're gonna make steps in the wrong direction. It's allowing people into that to say, like, hey, what's going on? Like I can tell you're off, or hey, you and your girl. Like perfect example, us with Mike Diorio. Like Mike Diorio would literally come up to me like, you and Adriana having sex? And it's like, no. Are you doing other stuff? Maybe. And it was like, sorry. And then it was like, all right, like, and then we would talk about, all right, where are the boundaries? And it was like, that's how we were able to get to that place where like, all right, we set up the right boundaries. But you need to let people in to be able to do that.
I think that's so good. And I think that is a huge one that we learned the hard way. Like, I don't know why there's this like stigma that accountability is like a bad thing. Like, we are blessed because of the accountability we had in our lives. And I think that the issue with a lot of young people, and again, we're at fault for this, is we think we know it all. Like, you don't know it all. Like, you're, like, practically speaking, you're looking at lives, even in the church, right? The people that you admire, for the most part, right? Most young people have like certain people, they're like, wow, like I want to love Jesus like that, or I want to mimic that kind of relationship, or I want to be career driven like this person. But you forget that they have like 30 years on you.
Yeah.
So why in your right mind would you think that in your 20 years, like you said something in the beginning, like legit, like you're just coming out of high school where you were still relying on people for like the most simplest direction. Do you think that you're gonna like one day to the next, or just because you go off to college, or just because you get your first real job, like you know it all? And I think that anytime we've struggled in our 20s, it's because there has been something hidden, or there's been an area where we've been too proud to humble ourselves and say like, I need accountability in this area. Or I need to lean into someone who does have more wisdom, and I honestly, like, I just need to humble myself, like, period. And I think in a generation that's so driven by social media and some of these things that pumps, like, do you, there's this constant pressure that makes us fall into this trap and this lie, again, that accountability is bad, or that your humility is a weakness, when in reality it's your strength. Like, one of like my top verses, and it's funny because when God first drilled it in me was when we were in the thick of some of this stuff in our early 20s, was John 3:30, which says, he must become greater and greater, and I must decrease. And I question sometimes, you know, even us as believers, if we really live by that standard, like the word tells us multiple times, like, die to yourself. Like Jesus says, take up your cross and walk, like follow me, like not follow your idea of what you think I am, like legit pick up your cross, pick up your junk and come follow me. Like, can you die to yourself daily? And I think the reality is that's counterculture. And at some point you have to be humble enough to say, I'm either, like you said, gonna buy into Jesus and realize, like, I may not feel this all the time, I may not even want to at times, but am I willing to really die to myself and live by the word and by what God is telling me to live by, even if I stick out like a sore thumb, like even if I'm the oddball in my friend group, like even if I'm the only one at my college, even if everything is coming at me and telling me that this is weak, can I have a resolve in my spirit? Can I have a conviction to say, like, I am humble enough to know I haven't lived that much of life, and that in order for me to live a full life, then maybe perhaps I need to trust this and just run with it.
Yeah. And you know, going off of that, like with the guardrails, I mean, the boundaries, like I look at them as guardrails, right? So when you're driving on the highway, there's guardrails, and pay attention to where those guardrails are, because odds are they're in areas where there's danger on the other side of that. There's a bridge, there's an abutment, there's some sort of immovable object that if you hit that, you will die. The guardrail is there to prevent you from hitting that. And so it's, when you look at boundaries, they're not there to constrain you. They're there to protect you. They're there to say, like, there's something on the other side of this that's not good for you. Like when you look at the original sin, right? God wasn't saying, like, I don't want you to know the things I know. It was, I know what's out there on the other side of this sin, and I don't want that life for you. And again, we as humans, we just love to look at that God's principles as constraints. And it's like, no, they're there to protect us. They're there to keep us in a healthy place. And so, again, going back to the topic of holiness, it's like Pastor outlined a lot of it a couple of weeks ago. It's like when you take sexuality outside of those boundaries, that's where a lot of the issues come. That's where a lot of the hurt comes. Not to say that there aren't issues or hurts inside the boundaries, but God set it up in a way where you have someone, right? So in a marriage, now you have this person that's there with you as a teammate to go through this thing. You know what I mean? And it's like, there's nothing on the other side of that. There's nothing good that's going to come out of that. And the problem is, you know, in your 20s, you're trying to figure out life, and there's a lot of pain, honestly, because you're gonna have disappointments, right? You're in college, you get out of college, you're trying to find a job. Like, trust me, I went through that. Like, we were planning our wedding, and I'm going to interviews and getting rejected left and right, signing a lease to an apartment with no job, and I went through a lot of rejection in those days, and it was a lot of, you know, pain, you know, because it's like I just spent the last 4 years going to school, and it's like I can't get a job, and it was like, things like that are going to happen. You're going to, you know, you might want to start a business or something, and it doesn't work. It's like all these things. It's like, but if you don't process all that stuff, all you do is run from it. And so even, you know, people jumping from relationship to relationship, right? You see that a lot. And that's one of the things that, you know, we've talked about, that we see a lot in some of our young adults and youth. It's like, you just got out of a relationship, you just jumped into another one. How is that healthy?
Yeah, you're bringing all your baggage from
Have you processed anything from that other relationship? Why were you in that other relationship in the first place? It's like, it takes some time to find you, because if you don't figure yourself out, and Pastor always talks about this too, is like, be the person that you wanna, that you want to date, right? Like, be that person, because if you don't do that, then now all you're doing is you're running to the next counterfeit, you know? And honestly, it might be the right person, but the wrong timing, because you're not in the right place. And you know how many relationships end that didn't have to end and could have been something beautiful, but both people were in a place that they didn't need to be, you know, at that time, because they haven't processed any of their crap. And so it's like, take time, like, enjoy singlehood. Like, there's nothing wrong with being single.
Well, I think we I don't know, we think that a person, and it doesn't even have to be a person, because I know we're talking a lot about relationships and like sexuality and stuff, but in general, like, anything outside of God isn't going to solve your emptiness. Like, anything outside of God isn't going to, like, strengthen you, like, long term, like, for the longevity of it. Like, it's always going to be a temporary fix if the motive in the heart isn't for you to find Jesus. Yeah. And again, I think the reality is you go through a lot of that. Like, I love that you said pain, because really we have to call it what it is. it's the breaking, right? We love to talk about, like, we sing all these Christian songs about like new wine and like, make me new, Lord. But we don't like the pressing that comes with it. We don't like the crushing, right, that comes with producing fruit. Yeah. And I think that's why it does seem more painful and more heightened in your 20s, because it's the first time, I shouldn't say it's the first time, you're beginning to figure out what the crushing really looks like. You know what I mean? And I think that if you can lean into that and again, be humble enough to say, Lord, like, I want you to crush me, as weird as that sounds, like he'll meet you there. But when we're jumping from one thing to another, if it's career, if it's a relationship, if it's even friendships, because sometimes even friendships can be toxic. Mm-hmm. Like we go from like one BFF to the next BFF, and then like all of this craziness, or money, like I need to hustle and I need to make this much because I have this goal of having a house and a this and a wife, and by 30, like we sit here and we like go rogue in some of these things that we miss the gain that's supposed to come from our pain because we're not willing to wait in it. Yeah, that's all. Yeah. That's all I got.
Yeah, we just jump from one thing to another.
Yeah.
Because even that, like, and a lot of what you're seeing right now in young adults in just the culture, not so much in the church, but just in the culture, like there's this whole like this new thing, the quiet quitting, right? Like if I'm not happy at a job, I'm just going to do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And then try to find another place, and it's like you're going to go to the next place and you're going to find a reason not to like that job. And it's like so you're going to do this, and guess what? Eventually, you're not going to find a job because they're going to look at your resume and see you've been at 6 places in 5 years. It's like, whoa, like this dude's not loyal. So I'm going on a tangent now, teaching kids about jobs and stuff. But it's out there in the culture, this whole thing of like, if where you are right now isn't like fulfilling or sad, it's like, just leave. It's like, go find something, and it's like, okay, figure out maybe why you're not fulfilled or satisfied where you are, because guess what? You might still feel that way in the next relationship. You might feel that way in the next apartment. You might feel that way in the next city. It might have more to do with you than the other person, right? We're quick to blame other people, right? Oh, this boss is a jerk. Well, I love, Pastor Steve used to tell this story about how like he had a boss that was a jerk, and he was like, like being like a proud 20-year-old, and the Holy Spirit hit him like, maybe you're not that great to manage.
So good.
Because he wasn't on time. And it was like, maybe you're not the best person to manage. And it's
maybe
like,
he doesn't like you back.
Yeah, so it's like, we're quick to put it on the other person. Oh, this church, like this, this ministry team or this ministry leader, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, maybe it has more to do with you. Maybe you have to learn to submit to leadership, even if you don't enjoy the leadership or think that they're qualified. Like, that's not for you to determine. You're not their boss, So there's a lot of that that's going on right now in the culture, and it's honestly foolish because, like you said, you're a 20-year-old. You don't know anything. And I know you think you do, and even you coming out of I went to school for engineering. I graduated. I knew nothing, and I knew that. I was glad that I knew that. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But there's people who think like, all right, I got this. I've been humbled a lot with that. Like I remember us having our first kid and leaving the hospital and saying like, they're really gonna let us leave? Like we have no idea what we're doing. This is another human being. We're gonna like kill this thing. We don't know what we're doing. But there's too many like this, and it has to do with, I personally think it's like the social media thing. It's like you're on TikTok learning all this stuff and you think you know everything, and it's like, relax. Like, learn from some people who have done it. Yeah. Listen to people who have lived through it, because it's wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes, right? Like, why would I want to repeat the mistakes? Like, I want to learn from someone else's. Like, I don't want to touch the fire that they touched. Like, well, that's dumb. Oh, I'm gonna do my own thing. I'll figure it out. I'm smarter than them. I can figure it out. It's like, okay, go for it.
See how it goes for you.
Yeah.
It's not gonna go very well.
No. And so, going back to like the whole like follower thing, it's what Paul said, right? Follow me as I follow Christ. And so, I'm gonna look to people who are following Christ in a way that's producing fruit, and say, I'm gonna follow those people. Like that was one of the things that drew us to New Life, was seeing past the leadership The three pastors that started were still together, looking at Pastor Marco and Lindsay and like the fruits that they had. And it was like, I want to live the way these people are living because they actually have fruit. Because right now, like the big thing is like this whole like influencer stuff, right? And it's like success doesn't mean blessing. Like the two are different. Like you can be successful and not be blessed.
That's really true.
Like there's plenty of people who are successful in what they do. They're very talented. They're very motivated. They can think through problems. You know, you have people in the industry, whatever. You know, these people are in politics, whatever. They're successful in what they do, but they're not blessed, possibly because they don't have the blessing from God. So that, again, going back to that point, like a lot of us are living in a way where we're like, I'm a grind. Oh, but by the way, Jesus, can you come with me?
Yeah. Well, even that, it's like going off of what you're saying with just the temperature of the culture, like Jesus isn't an influencer. He's a Lord and a Savior.
Yeah.
He's not your personal influencer. And like,
He's
why
not
do we...
self-help book.
Literally.
Like he is the book.
Literally, the book in the flesh. But it's so true. Like, why do... And again, I can appreciate why, as a young person, you may get that confused. But even that, like, I think sometimes we think that we can be proud and that we can have it put together because we have an encounter with Jesus. And that if you think about it, that is an influencer mindset. It's like I had this one, encounter with the Lord and I gave my life to him. But like you said, nothing in the practical is showing that he is Lord. That What does Lord mean? Master, that he has complete control over my life. And how foolish of us to think we come to the Lord and again, and just in our early 20s, we know Jesus as master right out of one encounter. Like to master something, someone has to be involved and in control of it. And I think that I would say if I could go back in time and tell us something when we first started taking Jesus seriously, is the freedom is that I know nothing. I think I tried so hard to do it right. Like, I remember literally stressing out. Like, I will never forget once asking for a meeting with one of my leaders and sitting in front of her and literally, like, legit, like, genuinely concerned, crying and saying, my biggest fear is to be out of God's will. Like, I was legit torn up about it. And she said something that broke me in such a beautiful way. It was so simple that honestly it went over my head until like months later. She said, Adri, do you love Jesus? And I was like, yes, of course I love, that's why I'm here. I was like legit offended because I'm like, wow, like I sat here and took the time to set up this meeting. And all this woman says after I sit here and I'm having like a whole meltdown is, do I love Jesus, like for real? But her point was like, if you love Jesus, you can't be out of his will. Like, do you live, is he Lord and master over your life? Then legit, like, why are you stressed out right now? Yeah. Like, you can't go wrong, And yeah, I would say, as weird as it sounds, I think the older we're getting now, we're to that point where like, yeah, that's the whole point. Like, that's the best part of it all, is that I don't have to have the answers. Yeah. Like, I just have to go to Jesus. I have to go to his word. I have to pour into his church. I have to get the accountability from the church to learn the things that maybe I haven't experienced in God yet. Yeah. And we'll be blessed because of it.
And be teachable. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talked about like, becoming a master or something. So just look at the disciples, right? They walked with Jesus every day for 3 years. And even still Peter was still Peter. Like he still messed up. Like the first moment he messed up. Like, it's like, oops, like everything we learned for the last 3 years is gone. Like I'm out. I don't know that guy. So it just goes to show, like, if you're like trying to like follow Jesus and live that way, like there's gonna be like those mess ups. But the point is to be teachable, because guess what? Jesus came back to Peter and had a moment with him and taught him and was his teacher. And so you might not have that moment with Jesus face to face, but guess what? You have leaders, you have the word, you have the godly friends around you that God will use to have those moments where when you mess up, it's like, hey, like, listen, you messed up, or you'll have that conviction. I mean, like I loved, like I said, having that conversation with that kid, and he's feeling the conviction from pastor's message, because he could have easily been like, psh, oh, it's easy for him to say that, you know, he doesn't know, you know what I mean? Like you could get all defensive or whatever, but if you're teachable, you'll say like, oh, he's right. You know, like the Holy Spirit is convicting me right now. So
that's really good. I may go on a little, this, I don't know if this is too harsh, but I'm just going to go for it.
go for it.
I would say to a young person that wants to buy into that lie, like, no one invests in me. Like, oh, but with the church so big, like, why does so-and-so have mentors and I don't have a mentor? Who have you gone to and asked? Like, who have you gone to, though? You know what I mean? Like, you made me think of it even with that. It's like we want to sit here and complain, and we want to be like, everything's an offense now. Like, you want to be a holy person that goes after Jesus, then go after the resources that Jesus gives you.
Yeah.
You really want to grow?
Everything's
like and I'm talking to young people who want to be serious about Jesus. Like, go ask somebody to mentor you. Like, don't buy that lie. I was gonna say bull. I don't know if I can say bull. Can I say bull?
Just don't finish this.
Well, babe, I wouldn't do that. I promise. But legit, like, I'm so sick of it, because it is one of those influencer things. It's like, but who's going to influence me? Like, again, like, is he Lord and Savior? Like, because you know what's so crazy? When Jesus called the disciples, what we forget is even Jesus challenged them. And we're like, but do you really want to follow me? Like, but do you really? Like, God in the flesh even stopped them and paused them and said, but consider it. Yeah. Like, consider what you're saying yes to. Like, are you really willing to die to yourself? Mm-hmm. If you are, great, follow me. Yeah. But if you're not, like, he didn't chase them. Like, no leader should have to chase you in your growth. Like, like, I love that Pastor Marco Lindsay always say, like, your soul, your responsibility. Like, no one is responsible for the health of your soul but you. You know what I mean? And I want to go as far as to say, like, not even your future spouse is responsible for your soul. Yeah. And we have to get over that fluffy, like, feeling stuff. Like, do you want Jesus or not? Because you know what? I took advantage of every opportunity that I had to be at the church. I took advantage of every opportunity I had to be around different leaders, because I'm like, I want to expose myself. I want to learn from all of these incredible people in our community that do have more under their belt than me. And I want to go as far as to say this, like, go after the leaders that make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, don't go after people that tickle you.
You know, because we did that for a little bit too. It's like, we kept tripping up. Why do we keep tripping up? Because we looked for the people that were going to say yes to our sin. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until we said no, like, no, Mike, no, and like all these different people, like, no, I want you to ask me the tough, I give you permission to ask me the tough questions. I'm making a vow to you also to say that I'm going to be honest, and your vow to me is that you're going to help teach me. What does the word say about this? Because I don't know. And that's where fruitfulness comes.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And again, I know the excuse that comes to mind right away is like, oh, well, the leaders are busy. And I love that Pastor Marco put that out there, that this year, like, he doesn't want to hear people say that to him. It's like, I'll ditto that, because I'm available. Like, if someone reaches out to me, like, we got 3 kids, we're busy, but like, I'll make the time. I'll find the time to meet with people if they want, because I love people. I love God. I love people. So it's like, don't like assume for other people. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, they look like they're busy. They seem like they're busy. Because guess what? Like, every time I've reached out to Pastor Marco to meet up with him, he's found time to meet with me, or anybody else that, you know, I've looked to as a leader. It's like, they'll find the time because they care about people. So you doing that is 2 things. It's pride, because it's a cop out for your pride, right? Like, I don't want to ask them, because if they say no, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah, it's false humility.
And then it's avoiding that feeling of rejection, which reality is not that, because even if you ask someone that's busy, they'll find the time at some point. So it's not like they're going to say, no, I don't want to talk to you. Like, none of the leaders at this house would ever do that. So yeah, if you're not doing it, it's because you don't want to. So I would say, like, I would ditto that. Like, if you really want to grow, you want to become a better follower of Christ, you want to become a better disciple, then go after the people who are here to disciple.
Yeah.
Like point blank, like go ask, like seek, right? The word says that, right? Seek and you'll find. Like it's not, I think of the parable, right, of the woman with the coin. Like she flipped her whole house upside down looking for that coin. And it's like that's the type of heart you need to have. Like if you want freedom in something, like you can't just like lackadaisically like, oh God, I'm gonna go to the altar and pray, and if you want to free me, you free me. Like no, like do everything in your power, everything, every resource you can find, every person you can talk to, anything that you can read, do all that, and then see if God doesn't meet you there.
Yeah. Well, I think even the verse you're using, right? Seek and you'll find. It doesn't say look. It doesn't say breeze over. Oh, just breeze over, and then if it doesn't work out. It says seek. Like if you picture someone who's seeking versus someone who's just looking around, there's a huge difference.
There's movement.
Yeah.
There's movement, and I think that's again going back to the culture. Like it's a lazy culture right now, and it's like a very microwave culture where everything has to be right there at the palm of your hand. It has to be quick. It has to be a 15-second TikTok video. Like that's the attention span. Like we have less attention span than goldfish now. But some stuff is not going to be that way. Some stuff you're going to have to work for. You're going to have to. Like you're going to have to do things that may not feel productive in the moment, but the principle is that it will be productive. It's the whole compound interest. That's another thing. Start investing. But compound interest is powerful because it's each time you put a little bit, and over the long run, you'll see the benefit. And so if you start putting a little bit into positive things, over the long run, you're going to see positive, as opposed to a little bit into the negative things that we don't want to be doing. Then over the long run, guess what? It's all going to blow up in your face.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said, because you talked about, right, like going after leaders and that leaders will make time, because I also feel the need to touch on this one. Like, you also have to go in with your expectation being that God is going to use people to help you along the way, not the expectation that things have to go my way. And why do I say that? Because it is very possible that you may reach out to so-and-so, right? And for whatever reason, it doesn't meet your expectation. But can you stay open and can you stay teachable? And, or do you shut down at the first disappointment? Like, oh, well, I thought that if I met with so-and-so, I was going to get through A to Z and I was going to get what I feel I needed out of that conversation because I'm going out of my way to reach out to this person and to be discipled. Or can you, like, I just want to expand on that point of being teachable. It's like, or do you approach every single person and every conversation with humility? Like, Lord, you can teach me in this. Like, Lord, your servant is here and they're listening. Like this may even be someone who I didn't even think I could resonate with, but can I be open? Can I go in to either this meeting or this coffee date or whatever it is, or honestly, this casual conversation I got thrown into on a Sunday with the mentality that, Lord, I'm going to be teachable, and whatever that looks like. Because I also hear that it's like then people are disappointed, but the only reason you're disappointed is because you wanted God to do things your way, and because it didn't go your way, now you want to act like you don't fit or you don't belong or you don't. It's like, no, actually, it's because you're disappointed that you wanted God to do things on your terms, and those are two different things.
Yeah, and it's like you're waiting for this like silver bullet that's gonna fix everything. And it doesn't exist. I mean, it doesn't. Like I said earlier, Peter was literally with Jesus for 3 years. Like, think about that. Like, he was literally with Jesus like this. And he still messed up the first moment he got a chance to mess up. He was still ready to, like, kill someone to defend Jesus. Like, he was still, like a hood. Like, he was still, like, it was still there. And it's like, after 3 years, you would have thought, oh my gosh, like, he should have been just like Jesus. And it's like, no, like, it's a process, and it's gonna, things take time. Like, all right, you're 24, whatever, 26, 22. you have 22 years of just gunk to get rid of. And it's like, you can't expect that to just happen because you went to the altar once. Like, that's part of it, right? Like, God starts to free you from some stuff, but that materializes over time. Like, you have to let that happen. You have to let things take their course. Like, you can't just rush through this. Like, this thing is, some of it's lifelong. You know, you hear Paul talk about the thorn in his side. Like, that's, he took that to his grave, whatever that was. And it's like, some things, like, you might have a hurt from, you know, a childhood, you know, situation, like a parent, like whatever, like that might be something that takes years for you to work through. And it's like, you can't just assume that, again, you put that false expectation, like, oh, I tried therapy. I went once and it didn't work. And it's like, well, yeah, you went once. It doesn't happen that way. It's not like they're going to just pull memories out of your brain with like a piece of equipment and you're all better. It's like, everything is a progression. Like I got to throw this everywhere, but I go to the gym and it's like, if I would have based my last 2 years of like my fitness journey, based it on the first day I went to the gym and made a decision based off that, I would have stopped because there's no results. That first day, that nothing happened. It was over the course of the last 2 years that I saw results that now I'm seeing. So it's the same when it comes to the spiritual, emotional, mental. Things take time. Yeah. So give it time. And that's why, again, going back to like the relationship stuff, it's like, give it time for you to like heal from the last mess that you got yourself into before you try to get into another mess. It's like, give it time. Let things heal, let things settle out, and then let God kind of
do his thing.
Yeah, like I was just talking to one of the guys in my crew, like, God was the one that decided Adam needed a helper. Adam wasn't looking for a helper. Adam was just chilling with animals, naming them, doing his thing, living out in the wilderness, butt naked, just Bear Grylls, like just eating fish, whatever. And then God was like, this dude is just, he needs a helper. Like, he needs someone. Like, this is too much. He needs a feminine touch. And then God gave him Eve. So it's the same thing. Like, put your head down, do what's in front of you, be teachable, keep loving God, keep serving, and everything else will kind of, it'll fall into place. Like the right person. Like, I love hearing the stories that we've seen, like of Ray and Eric. Like, they're serving, and then they kind of like, it happens because they're in the house serving to get, you know what I mean? It's like, don't force it. It doesn't have to be forced. Like, if it's meant to be, it'll be, you know. Don't also be passive, but like, you don't have to force it. So it's like, it's a good balance of like, all right, God, I'm teachable, I'm open, let's see, you know?
Yeah, and I want to say this too, because there may be young adults who are already married, who may have like jumped relationship to relationship, and I feel like we can speak into that because that was very much our story. There's grace for it all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Really. And I mean this with every fiber of my being. Like, there is grace for all of it. Maybe you're sitting here and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I should have like heard some of these things before I got married. And like, now we're married and we're not saying get divorced now. We're not saying that. God is good.
We were a hot mess.
we were a hot mess, yes.
For a lot of our early years.
Yes, for sure. I mean, we're still kind of a hot mess, but that's okay. We have Jesus.
Figure it out.
So, but I do want to say that because I don't want it to come off like this extreme. Like, God, again, like, God is in control of it all. And even if you're married now, and maybe you already do have kids, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can recognize these patterns, and I wish I would have maybe slowed things down or been more patient or whatever. Like God meets us exactly where we are, and God's promises don't change because you may have stumbled forward. Like, God's grace is sufficient for all of your needs. So I just want to say that too, because we also have that as part of our story. It's like we've worked through things in the last few years that for sure is a learning curve, and we are very open about sharing them because we don't want to see younger people stumble through them, and we want people to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, we all have baggage. I think that's the goal, is to limit the amount of baggage you bring into it. But like she's saying, if you're already in it, like that's where we were. And it's funny because like in the last 2 or 3 years is really when a lot of that baggage has been exposed. You know, like some of the stuff that I carried from my childhood, that now I'm able to recognize, like when we have a disagreement and I feel myself shutting down and isolating, like I'm able to recognize that now. Whereas early in our relationship, in our marriage, I didn't even see that. So it was like, it would just be like bumping heads between each other because I have my baggage, she had her baggage, and we're not even aware of, we just thought the other person was a jerk. You suck. It's like, no, we both kind of suck. So let's figure this thing out together. We're on the same team.
Together.
We're on, yeah,
we'll make our way to Jesus.
That's kind of where we're at.
Oh man.